Stop reading your ancient and medieval history textbooks chronologically. Seriously, close the books, drop the highlighter, and listen to me very carefully. If you are preparing for mains 2026 by trying to blindly memorize every minor king, every standalone copper plate inscription, or the exact physical dimensions of 100 different temples, you are actively burning your time. You are studying for an exam that no longer exists. Look at the ground reality. Between 2013 and 2025, the UPSC mains examination featured exactly 36 questions in this specific domain. When most aspirants look at this list, they see absolute chaos. They think the examiner wakes up on the morning of the paper and pulls random topics out of a hat. But if you run these 36 questions through a rigorous structural autopsy, the mask comes off. UPSC does not ask random questions. They follow highly predictable, deeply repetitive patterns. In fact, all 36 questions boil down to just five major question families, more or less. These five families, that is question families, explain the overwhelming majority of past year questions behavior. Before we expose those families, you have to understand the changing rules of the game you are going to play. For that matter, you are playing. The exam you are writing in 2026 is structurally light years away from the exam of 2013. This paper has evolved through three distinction three distinct historical eras. They are classified into era 1, era 2, era 3. The era 1 is 2013 to 2016, that is called as the factual era. Then 2017 to 2022, that belongs to the analytical era. This is called as era number 2. Then 2023 and 2025, that era is called as era number 3, that is socio-economic realism. The era is factual to analytical, analytical to socio-economic realism. The change, the drafted, the shift visible from factual to socio-economic realism as far as art and architecture, ancient India, medieval India, art, art, art and architecture, and culture is concerned. So we are going to discuss about era number 1, that is the factual era. This era spanning 2013 to 2016, 3 years. This was the direct and textbook phase, what we call this. The examiner pulled questions almost verbatim from standard reference manuals in these 3 years. In 2013, they asked Chola architecture represents a high water mark in the evolution of temple architecture. Discuss. Look at this question. And then in 2014, they asked Gandhara sculpture owed as much to the Roman as to the Greeks. If you memorized core physical features, you scored. Interlinking was minimal in that era. After look at the observation of these two questions from the factual era belongs to in 2013 and 2014, they asked direct questions. Look at the 2013 question, that is Chola architecture represents a high water mark in the evolution of temple architecture. That is the direct question. If you know about the Chola architecture and know about the temple architecture and temples, the pattern, that will be simple. No analysis, no thinking, etc. Then comes to the 2014 also. Gandhara sculpture owed as much to the Roman as to the Greeks. This is also something like that only, because if you memorized core physical features and patterns, you scored. Interlinking was minimal. That is direct textbook feature driven only in the era number one, that is that 2013 to 2016. Then we are moving to the era number two, that is the analytical and abstract era. This spanning from 2017 to 2022. So the UPSC realized that candidates were simply memorizing reference materials without understanding them, because UPSC is time to time evaluating their papers, their structure, their analysis, their pattern, etc. So they understand about the candidate's mind. They realized that the candidates were simply memorizing reference materials without understanding the content. So they shifted the goalpost to test the thought process behind the art. They are not asking about the features, etc. They shifted their thinking to what is the thought behind the art. So in 2017, they forced you to evaluate why the excellence of Gupta numismatic art was not noticeable in latter times. They asked about thinking, they asked about analysis, they asked about your judgment, your explanation, your analysis. Then 2020 again they asked, they dropped this major question like this: Indian philosophy and tradition played a significant role in conceiving and shaping the monuments and their art in India. They hit the important thing: Indian philosophy and tradition played a significant role in conceiving, shaping the monuments and their art in India. So they asked about philosophy, they asked about tradition behind the monuments, behind the shaping the monuments and their art in India. So rote memorization failed completely here, wiped out. You have to demonstrate why an architectural structure took its specific form based on underlying philosophical transformation. In the first era, they asked direct questions like discuss physical features, discuss temple architecture, discuss Chola temple architecture, etc. etc. Next, Gandhara art, etc. But in 2017 to 2022, they asked behind the art form, behind the art form, how philosophy and tradition has been thrive them to make monuments, shaping the monuments. So you have to understand the philosophy behind the art. So you have to understand and you have to write the demand of the question that is behind the thriving thriving force, thriving ideology to build this type of monument. So why architectural structure took its specific form based on underlying philosophical transformations. They asked about the idea behind the making of the particular structure. What is the philosophy behind the making the particular structure? They want to you to interpret the answer. So the questions have been changed like this, shifted like this, from direct to analysis, that to interpretation. So now comes to the third era, that is present era. We have to write this down in bold letters in your notebook. That is, welcome to era number 3. That is socio-economic realism era from 2023 to 2025. This is the specific arena you are competing in for 2026. So recent years show a visible aggressive movement beyond elite court narratives toward broader social, economic, and institutional history. The focus is no longer pinned merely to kingly lineages. Instead, questions are anchored to subaltern history, structural social mutations, technological inputs, and material economic conditions of the masses. Look at the undeniable evidence from the last 3 years. In 2023, they didn't ask for a list of Delhi Sultanate rulers or their battles. They asked for the major technological changes that is introduced during the Sultanate period and how they influenced the society. Then 2024 they demanded a sharp comparative analysis of the changes in the field of society and economy from the Rigvedic to the latter Vedic period. Then in 2025, they bypassed standard political history to focus directly on Mahatma Jyotirao Phule's writings and how his social reforms touched almost all subaltern classes. Right alongside Akbar's religious syncretism, they asked in 2025. The overarching trajectory is unmistakable. So UPSC is no longer treats art and culture as an isolated decorative silo. They have seamlessly merged it back into core institutional, social, and economic history. They want you to read history through the eyes of an administrator, not a museum guide. When you understand and observing the 2023 to 2025, the era number 3, they are asking questions regarding socio-economic history. They are not asking about political history like kings, battles. They are not interested in that, the history of political battle history. They asked about economy. They asked about economy in the time of Delhi Sultanate. They asked about society in the in the name in the religious in the time of Akbar. They asked about Akbar religious syncretism. So they are not interested. UPSC is asking about economy, economy, and society, social conditions, women situation, etc. They are asking about. They are not asking about the political history of this king, that king. No, they want you to understand the religious systems, society, social structure, and economic conditions at the time of those era in medieval and ancient times. So it will be helpful to administrative future administrator in the building of nation, in the administrative structure. So that is why they shifted the questions from political history to art and architecture, that too focused on economy socio realism. They are asking about the questions with the temple architecture also. They are using temple as a religious as well as social as well as economic power of the particular dynasty in 12th or 13th century. So they asking not only about the art and architecture features, they are not asking only about the features of the particular monument. They are asking about behind the making of the particular architecture and how to influence the particular architecture in those times. They are asking, and more or less they are asking about, UPSC is asking about exactly the economy in the particular system, in the particular year, particular arena, particular dynasty, and political, not only political system they are focusing on social system, women, conditions, and religious system. They are asking about the society, culture, economy, religious, as well as they're asking about technology, Persian wheel technology they introduced in the Delhi Sultanate period. So they're asking about how society forward moving forward with the technological influence. So they are asking about all these things rather than political history, battles, which king built that empire, which king fought with other king, which king annexed that 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 place, that industry. No, they are asking about pure economy and society as well as religious technological thoughts of the particular time. So you have to be very careful. For that matter, we don't want. I'm not saying that UPSC is forgetting about political history, etc. I'm not saying that, but the trend is like is going this way. That is I'm telling you. Why? Because UPSC's prediction is never understanding. So in this way, why how to prepare for the future examination with the direction given by UPSC in the form of PYQs. So that is the thing we have to understand with the PYQs, with the three eras. So we are going to discuss deconstruction the five question families UPSC is asking oftenly. If you want to strip away the noise from if you want to strip away the noise from your 2026 preparation, you must stop organizing your folders by century. You must group your entire preparation around the five question families. Let's break them down one by one with a direct proof from our 36 questions data set. Because remember, UPSC does not repeat questions, but it repeatedly rewards the same historical ways of thinking as well as the repeated architecture rather than repeating questions. So comes to the family number one, that is mirror of society, that is social and economic realities. This family operates on a fixed premise, that is art, literature, and institutions are not created in a vacuum. They are direct products of contemporary material realities. You have to understand this point. UPSC continuously asks you to look past the beautiful surface of the text or artifact to discover the daily lives, labor conditions, and economic status of common people at that times. So look at the mapping, the 2025 question on foolish subaltern reforms. Then the 2024, the questions are on the Rigvedic versus later Vedic economic transition. In 2023, questions on Sultanate technology's social footprint. And 2013 questions on how Sangam literature portrays vivid socio-economic conditions. These are all the exact same question template applied to the different historical eras. That testing your ability to extract social history from classical sources. UPSC is asking, I'm saying UPSC is asking about the future administrator to understand the culture, economy of the particular year and particular place through historical history from classical sources. That is why questions are asking from this family again and again, because they are focusing on society, economy, and common man conditions rather than kings, nobles, nobleocracy. Then we are moving to family number 2, that is Imperial architecture and dynastic high water marks. This is the structural powerhouse of the syllabus because architecture. The template here is highly reliable. UPSC selects a major ruling dynasty or civilization and evaluates its core contribution to India's permanent architectural heritage under state patronage. What is the examiner's core axiom here? UPSC rarely rewards monument memorization in isolation. It rewards understanding how political power converted economic surplus into durable cultural infrastructure. So we have to understand the core axiom here, how political power converted economic surplus into durable cultural infrastructure. Because with that only you have to build this type of monuments in architecture, etc. Without economic surplus, without political power, you don't build this much high water mark infrastructure and architecture. So the data shows this pattern repeating like clockwork. In 2025, they asked it was the salient features of urban architecture and the resilient vigor of Chandela art forms. Look at the question they asked regarding architecture, Harappan architecture as well as Chandela art forms. In 2024, it was the contribution of the Pallavas of Kanchi to South Indian art and literature, paired with the Cholas highest. So look at the 2024 question. They asked Pallavas and Cholas in the same question regarding art and literature. So look at the questions and as well as achievement in architecture also, as far as South Indian is concerned. In 2022, they forced a direct side-by-side comparison of the Gupta and Chola contribution to Indian heritage. Look at these three questions 2025, 2024, and 2022. They asked about Chola, they asked about Pallava, they asked about Harappan civilization, art and architecture, and they asked about Chendelas from North India. They asked about Pallava and Cholas in the South India, southern part. So they asked about Gupta and Chola contribution in the Indian heritage comparison. What you have to understand, what you have to learn from this lesson. You don't need to study 50 minor local chieftains. You need to master the infrastructural legacy of the major imperial states. Whether it is Chola, whether it is Pallava, whether it is Vijayanagara, whether it is Chandel art forms. You have to focus on architecture, which is culminated the history, which is high water mark in history, which is helpful to the heritage of India. That is the thing you have to focus. As far as imperial architecture, art and architecture is concerned, these questions are again and again asking. After economy and the socio-realism questions, they are asking about imperial architecture. They are asking with the help of imperial architecture, they want you to expect, analyze the social conditions, the economic conditions, the religious conditions of that type particular time. That type of questions also going to be asked in the further years of the examination. So you have to understand the veracity of the preparation. You have the understanding of the direction of the UPSC is giving and framing the questions as far as UPSC, CSC, art and architecture, culture, ancient India, medieval India history is concerned, as far as GS paper 1 mains is concerned. So after completing the family number 2, that is imperial architecture, we are moving to family number 3, that is literature, philosophy and foreign accounts. We have to do something. Stop looking for long lists of ancient books titles to memorize. That is the absolute waste thing. In this family, the examiner wants to know how to texts, philosophies and external travelogues were used to reconstruct our historical narrative, or how they captured the distinct spirit of that particular age. So they asked about the texts, the philosophies underline the text, philosophies inside the text, and external travelogues like Ibn Battuta, like Fahian, etc., were used to reconstruct our historical narrative at that time, at that point of time, and how they capture the distinct spirit of that particular age. So look at the structural proof. In 2020, they asked how Persian literary sources reflect the spirit of the medieval age. Look at the question. They asked how Persian literary sources reflect the spirit of the medieval age. They want you to analyze the medieval age with the use of Persian literary sources and the spirit of the medieval age with the help of Persian literary sources. Then comes to the 2018 question. They checked the importance of Chinese and Arab travelers in the literal reconstruction of the early Indian history. And comes to the 2014, they targeted the strategic and structural differences between the ancient universities of Taxila and Nalanda. The core focus here is historiography. The historiography is how we use intellectual assets to decode the past with the help of history. So that is the family number 3. They are not interested. UPSC is not interested the collection of books, collection of texts, collection of philosophy, and a collection of foreign accounts. They want you to know about the particular age. Then it comes to medieval age, then it comes to ancient age, then it comes to particular centuries with the help of literary sources which were available at that point of time or written at that point of time, and as well as they are also interested, UPSC interested in the foreign travelogues while visiting the particular dynasty or particular place and a particular time. So, with their literary sources, with their content, with their books, with their texts, also we have to analyze the particular social, economic, religious, and technological conditions at that point of time. That is UPSC want you to extract the content, extract the living conditions at that point of time in the form of answers. Then we are moving to the family number 4, that is religious, mystic, and democratizing movements. This family tracks the grand ideological shifts of Indian history. The focus is almost exclusively on heterodox, mystic, mystic or subaltern religious expressions that actively challenged rigid orthodox hierarchies or synthesized diverse cultures. This family is focusing on religious and chauvinistic movements and democratic movements, Shavanism, grand ideological shifts, heterodox, mystic, subaltern religious expressions that actively challenged the rigid orthodox hierarchies or synthesized diverse cultures at the point of time ancient and medieval India. The historical breadcrumbs are clear. Akbar's religious syncretism in 2025, the underlying nature of Bhakti literature in 2021, the Pala period as the most critical phase of the survival of structural Buddhism in 2020, and the reorientation of the Bhakti movement by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in 2018. If a religion, they asked questions like this in 2025, 2021, 2020, in 2018. They asked about Bhakti movement. They asked about the religious syncretism of Akbar with Sulhei Kal and with Pala period, structural Buddhism in 2020, and Bhakti literature again asked Nirguna, Saguna Bhakti, etc. If a religious movement democratized society or created a cultural bridge, it is an automatic target for this family. So you have to understand the thing why UPSC is asking, why UPSC is asking, how this will helpful to a future administrator. If that is these two criteria they eligible, you have to focus on that target also, because there will be higher chances in converting to the question as far as belongs to this family. That is family number 4, religious, mystic, democratizing movements. It belongs to Sufism also. Sufi questions also might be chance to come in the examination. Then comes to the final family, that is family number 5, civilizational continuity synthesis and motives. This is the macro narrative family. These questions test your grasp of the Indian melting pot, how the Indian civilization possesses an unbroken cultural longevity compared to dead ancient empires like Egypt or Mesopotamia, and how it absorbs foreign elements or deploys symbolic motifs. Those are asking in this structural family, what is the proof? The proof is everywhere across the papers. Look at the 2022 question on the precise iconographic significance of lion and bull figures in Indian mythology and architecture. Again, look at the 2019 and 2014, where they isolated the precise Central Asian, Greek, and Roman elements embedded within Gandhara sculpture. Look at 2015's famous question on why the ancient civilization of the Indian subcontinent preserved its traditions without a structural breakdown to the present day. This family demands an understanding of synthesis and survival. They asked in 2013 or 14 regarding Indian Indus Valley civilization survivability now also. These type of questions they are asking to interlink the bridge and interlink the past is the key for the future or the present. That type of questions are asking from this family. So the continuity, the synthesis, the motifs are need of the hour, like Harappa, Vedic, classical, medieval, Indian history. So that type of questions are also asked from many years. So what is the examiner curveballs? What is the examiner curveballs? Whenever you run a structural autopsy, you will encounter 2 to 3 questions that don't fit the standard families. These are tactical curveballs designed to test raw spatial logic or deep micro facts under time pressure. Comes to the question number 8 in 2023, the role of geographical factors toward the development of ancient India. In this question, they asked about testing geopolitical determinism with this particular question. Comes to question number 32, that is 2014. That is 2014 question. Why so many empire shaking battles were fought specifically at Panipat? This is the testing strategic choke point geography. Comes to the 2013 question. Tandava dance as a recorded in early inscriptions. This is a pure hyper specific microfactual detail. So you don't have to be fear about these type of questions. But UPSC is compulsorily asking like these questions. Here are there, now are there. So do not rebuild your entire preparation strategy around these anomalies. So because UPSC is giving these type of curveballs for testing the effectiveness of preparation of students. So acknowledge them, treat them as test of broad analytical reasoning, and keep your core preparation anchored to the 5 primary question families which we discussed earlier in this class. So, so comes to the case study we are going to discuss, that is textbook trap versus administrative lens. What is this? What is this? Let's say aspirant A, textbook trap person. Aspirant B, the administrative lens person. So wrote lists of physical features. Aspirant A applies socio-economic template. Aspirant B, architecture treated as isolated art. Aspirant A, aspirant B, art used as a historical mirror. Aspirant A fails to address the core prompt. Aspirant B directly answers the true question. After these features of the particular question, aspirant A get 3 marks for 3 out of 10. But aspirant B, which is preparing the administrative lens, is 6.5 by 10. So look at the shift and look at the contrast here. Now let's execute this type of political exercise, practical exercise. I will repeat it again. Don't worry. Now let's execute a practical exercise that is rarely demonstrated in standard coaching formats. Let's look at this live case study using an actual UPSC question. So you can see exactly how this structural shift determines your marks on this final evaluation sheet. Let me take a one simple question. Take a close look at this authentic 2022 PYQ. I'm taking from 2022 question. How will you explain that medieval Indian temple sculptures represent the social life of those days? This is the question. An average candidate, let's call them as aspirant A, sees the word aspirant A sees the word temple and immediately enters autopilot mode. Their brain pulls up generic facts from a culture manual. They start listing down temple features. They write about Garbhagruha, the Shikara, the name drop Khajuraho. They mention the Konark Sun Temple, and they start that the carvings are highly detailed and aesthetically beautiful, etc., etc. What does the evaluator do after this? After seeing this answer, they award that answer a flat 3 marks out of 10. Why? Because aspirant A answered the question they wanted to be asked, not the question explicitly framed on the paper. He did not address the demand of the question. UPSC did not ask for a structural description of medieval architecture. They asked how those sculptures served as a historical record of social life. That is the demand of the question. Then you have to understand the demand of the question, then you have to write for reaching the demand of the question. You don't write whatever you want to write. Now let's look at how a trained mind, that is aspirant B, approach the exact same answer sheet. So aspirant B implements the socio-economic linkage template. So they don't treat architecture as isolated art, they treat it as a social mirror. That is the question, that is the actual demand of the question. Look at how they engineer their body paragraphs to directly address the core prompt. Paragraph number 1, that is occupational stratification and labor divisions. Rather than merely noting the presence of carved structures, carved figures, the response highlights that lower panels on structures like the Lakshmana temple at Khajuraho or temple at Hampi explicitly depict musicians, agriculture laborers, hunters, and domestic workers. This provides concrete, non literary evidence of the contemporary division of the labor and class stratification in the medieval society. In the paragraph 1, they explicitly discussion about occupational stratification and labor divisions. Then comes to paragraph 2, material culture, dress and trade links. The meticulous detailing of costuming, intricate coiffures, and distinct textile patterns on the Surasundaris and Apsaras across early medieval Odisha temples serves as a primary source for mapping the material culture, luxury trade routes, and textile technology accessible to contemporary elites. Then paragraph 3. Everyday secular domestic minor friezes running along temple basements routinely capture non-religious narratives. Common folk engaged in storytelling, teachers instructing disciples, local martial arts practices, and women nurturing children. This structurally proves that the temple prescient functioned as a vital secular community hub reflecting the ordinary human condition rather than functioning purely as an isolated site of transient worship. So observe the stark contrast here. Aspirant A provided a static museum category entry, but aspirant B, what he done? Aspirant B delivered an institutional social analysis. That is why one gets stuck at a 3 mark floor while the other breaks through to a 6.5 mark ceiling. To survive the socio-economic realism era, you must train your eyes to read the social forces frozen in ancient stone. So you have to think like this way and write like this way rather than evidence society conclusion. You have to write like this way, like temple sculpture, occupations, economic organization, social hierarchy, and historical inference. This is the way of writing. This is the way of writing an answer for 6.5 marks in the examination. So comes to the 2026 blueprint, that is ultra probable questions. If you are targeting mains 2026, you need a high actionable strategy pivot, because here is your operational playbook. That is, first you have to do is abandon abandon chronological note making. You have to do, first of all, stop creating linear timelines of rulers for every single dynasty or civilization. You cover your notebook must contain a single page divided into four quadrant system rather than chronological net making. What is the quadrant system? That is social life, economic realities, technological inputs, and architectural legacy. These four quadrant system. When you study the Cholas, the Guptas, or Delhi Sultanates, whatever you want dynasty you have to take, fill out these exact quadrants. When UPSC hits you with an unexpected question about their art, you will effortlessly pull analytical links from your social and economical quadrants to build a rich interlinked response. That is the way of making an notes for this GS paper 1 art and architecture culture. Then second one, upgrade your reading material. Standard revision notes are useful for prelims recognition, but they lack the analytical depth required for mains. You must master class 11th and 12th themes in Indian history, volume 1 to 3, along with the class 11 introduction to Indian art. With this, otherwise you NCRT 11th, 12th, older versions also. You have to look at the books also, first of all. Master the class 11th, 12th themes in Indian history, volume 1 to 3, along with the class 11th introduction to Indian art, that is NCRT 11th. This is 11th, 12th, and 11th introduction to the art Indian. To not just read the political summaries, focus heavily on the text blocks detailing agrarian land grants, localized manufacturing, and the spread of vernacular language. Let's apply this system to our future. Let's look at one of our engineered ultra probable questions for mains 2026 breakdown in answer framework line by line. What is the 2026 target? Theme 5, regional temple centered economies. The probable question like this. In early medieval South India, the temple complex was not merely a space for spiritual worship, but functioned as an institutional nucleus, agrarian expansion, and economic redistribution discussed. This is the particular question. If you hand this to an untrained candidate, they will waste 200 words listing the dimension of the Brihadishwara temple, Vimana. But look closely at the core administrative keywords: institutional nucleus, agrarian expansion, and economic redistribution. This is a hardcore economic history question wearing the clothes of an art and culture topic. Let's build the three-part scoring framework. First one is the contextual anchor. The anchor is 50 words. Avoid a generic superficial opinion. Begin with a robust socio-economic historical anchor. The framework is simple. Link the rise of massive temple complexes during the Pallava and Chola eras to the state-backed mechanisms of Brahmadeya and Deva Dana. Brahmadeya means land grants to Brahmanas. Devadana means land grants directly to temples. Then what is the thesis statement? State clearly the early medieval South Indian temple operated as the central financial engine of the rural ecosystem, serving simultaneously as a corporate land manager, a massive institutional employer, and a rural credit bank. This is the first part. Part number two, that is deconstruction, deconstruct in the core body paragraphs. Introduction completed. Second part is body. You must address the two halves of the examiner's prompt with the absolute precision. What is the pillar number one here? Driving agrarian expansion. Explain the structural mechanism. Temples were routinely granted large tracts of uncultivated wasteland, that is called as kila, armored the immense treasury wealth. The temple authorities cleared forests, mobilized agrarian labor, and constructed complex irrigation infrastructure, such as stone channels and massive tanks. This active investment converted dry marginal zones into highly productive double cropped paddy fields, expanding the revenue frontiers of the state. This is regarding about agrarian expansion of the particular question. Then pillar number two, that is economic engine, engine of economic redistribution. So map the flow of wealth. The temple operated exactly like a regional development bank. As a massive consumer, it generated constant demand for oil, cloth, grain, metalwares, and spices, sustaining local merchant guilds, manigramam, and artisans. So, as a major employer, it provided livelihood to thousands of musicians, accountants, weavers, and stone cutters. Crucially, as a financial institution, the temple advanced low interest capital loans to village assemblies, that is called as sabas, and merchant bodies during droughts or trade disruptions, stabilizing local production network. Let's look at how these elements physically integrated into structural layout of a typical South Indian temple complex. So, what is the anatomy of temple centered economy? To help visualize how these socio-economic roles materialized on the ground, let's examine the spatial and structural components of these early medieval complexes. Notice how the layout incorporates administrative storage and assembly spaces alongside religious shrines. I have requested our visual. This is the let's look at the anatomical breakdown again. Analyzing this visual, notice that massive prakaras, massive prakaras. So regarding defensive purpose using temple architecture, we are discussing about that temple architecture prakaras did not just serve defensive purpose. They enclosed a vast institutional city, the mandapas, etc., etc. So comes to the part 3, administrative conclusion, that is 50 words. Never conclude a high scoring answer with a simplistic statement like hence temples were very important, connect, etc., etc. Connect your final thought back to the broader survival of civilization. Conclude by demonstrating that the long term structural durability and institutional continuity of early medieval South Indian societies did not depend solely on the standing armies of the capital, but on the decentralized resilience of this temple centered economic model, which continued to function smoothly even when central political dynasties collapsed. So this is the way of the real answer structure. You have to write the particular answer as far as to 2026 examination is concerned. So in this particular question, this is our one of the expected probable question. In this question, we are taking the answer with 250 words answer. For 50 words, we have taken for introduction. Then remaining 150 words as paragraphs to pillars taking as that is body of the particular answer. Then another 50 words we have taken to conclusion of the particular answer. So that is the way of the writing and particular answer as far as the mains exam GS paper 1 is concerned. So that is why we are going to take this much time for explaining the analysis from 2013 to 2025 papers. With that, we are explaining upgrade ultra probable questions for 2026. With that also, the how to write an answer with answer structure with the model answer, that is also I am telling in this particular class. Then finally where comes to then finally what I am asking you simple, that is, do you see the structural shift we have executed over the last 50 minutes? We took a subject that thousands of aspirants routinely fail because they treat it like a phone book memorization exercise, and we transformed it into a clear, predictable system of institutional design, resource flows, and high scoring answer templates. If you are serious about clearing mains 2026, this is the exact lens you must adopt. Stop looking at history as a dead timeline of a deceased rulers. Start evaluating it as a dynamic system of resources, societal layers, and governance. And I am going to teach the final core principle is history is not memory. History is evidence of how societies solved problems. UPSC does not reward memory of the past. It rewards the extraction of patterns from the past. Your immediate homework after closing this video, go straight back to your notes for ancient and medieval history and redraw them completely into four quadrant matrix we built today. In our next episode, we are running a comprehensive structural autopsy on the second major pillar of GS paper 1, that is modern history, post independence history, and world history. I'm going to show you the hard data behind why the weightage of world history has completely plummeted over the last few cycles, and exactly how to trim down your preparation to save hundreds of hours of study time. Hit that subscribe button below, clean up your notebook layout tonight, and let's start approaching this entire syllabus like future administrator. I will see you in the next masterclass.